Hey, what's going on, gang? Nate on the Stone here. Welcome back to my channel. Higher education is a swamp, in the worst sense of the word. Gone are the days when higher education was something to be coveted, something that a small number of people dreamed of and worked incessantly towards because they had a dream and a passion for science, math, literature, history, theater, or art. Now, it's just an intellectual gulag. I'm pretty sure that I don't have to regale you with a litany of examples, but a few highlights would be in order. For example, Michigan State University Professor Joseph Cesario and University of Maryland Professor David Johnson both retracted their own academic paper published in 2019 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, where they analyzed data on police shootings, concluding that race did not play a role in whether or not a police officer shot a suspect or not, thereby contradicting the new national narrative that would have Black Americans, and especially young male Black Americans, as the hunted deer in the asphalt jungle by racist cops. The reason? Heather McDonald, attorney and contributing editor to City Journal, actually cited their paper in one of her own pieces. And since McDonald also wrote the book The War on Cops, you can tell how that would be, in the left's own terminology, problematic. Retribution was swift and terrible. MSU's Graduate Employees Union got Steve Hsu, a physicist at the university, and the man who actually got Cesario the funding for his research, fired from his academic position. The Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences published an editorial where they accused Cesario and Johnson of quote-unquote poorly framing their argument, which is actually what probably caused the two professors to retract their paper as quickly as possible and grovel for forgiveness at the feet of their ideological masters. For her part, Heather McDonald noted in a follow-up piece published in the Wall Street Journal that if academia made itself subservient to politics, then before too long, academia would be completely controlled by politics. No more free inquiry, no more scholarship, no more research. Everything that happens within an institution of higher learning, all the research and education that supposedly goes on within it, would only be for the furtherance of the ideological narrative. In fact, a lot of what's happening today in higher education can be seen as academia becoming simply another organ of politics. Or to put it more accurately, another organ of our ideologically infested culture. Look, for example, at what's happened to the classics. Now, you might think that the classics would be the most apolitical field of study that one could find. I mean, how woke can you make the study of ancient Greek and Roman history, culture, religion, and literature? But never underestimate the determination of the ideologues, my friends. Last year, Danielle Padilla-Peralta, a classics professor over at Princeton, presented a paper in which he argued to the entire field, because that is essentially what you are doing when you are presenting a paper at a symposium. He argued to the entire field that the classics were too white. No joke, this is actually what Professor Peralta had to say. If one were intentionally to design a discipline whose institutional organs and gatekeeping protocols were explicitly aimed at disavowing the legitimate status of scholars of color as producers of knowledge, one could not do better than what classics has done. And if you think that that's a number, get a load of his so-called solution, which is nothing more than straight-up racism. For this reparative, epistemic justice to take flight, holders of privilege will need to surrender their privilege. In practical terms, this means that in an economy of academic prestige, defined and governed by scarcity, white men will have to surrender the privilege they have of seeing their words printed and disseminated. They will have to take a back seat so that people of color and women and gender non-conforming scholars of color benefit from the privilege of seeing their words on the page. To translate that jargon into plain English, white classicists will either have to stop submitting papers to academic journals for publication and stop requesting to present papers at symposiums and willingly go to the back of the bus, or The editors of said academic journals and the organizers of said symposiums will have to actively decide not to allow these particular scholars to present their work and research, their arguments and their ideas simply because of their skin color and their sex. And that's just the surface, gang. Go to the website Campus Reform and you'll be up to your ears in stories, such as the one where a college professor lamented the return of college football, because, you know, college football is a reliquary of white supremacy and capitalism. You'll find stories of professors calling American exceptionalism white supremacy. And you'll also find stories detailing how some colleges are actually creating courses named, not a joke, White Supremacy in the Age of Trump. It would be bad enough if this intellectual insanity was confined to the highest echelons of public education, because it would mean that our intellectual class was completely indoctrinated into this mentality. But at the very least, if that were the case, we could comfort ourselves with the fact that before they went to college, kids at least would have been grounded, at least in part, into reality. From kindergarten through senior year of high school, they would have been taught real history, math, literature, facts, logic, and how to think, which would act as a shield, an immunization to the insanity that they would encounter on college campuses. But this is the actual problem. Critical theories, intersectionality, wokeness, they've trickled down from the university system, and they have infected not just high school, but grade school and kindergarten as well. The moment that a child sets his foot now into a public schoolroom, his indoctrination begins. And this brings us to the Loudon County Public Schools, located in the DC metro area of Virginia, and actually, coincidentally, one of the wealthiest school districts in the country. The district actually just announced new professional conduct standards based on the principles of professionalism, respect, civility, and wait for it, gang, inclusivity. On its website, LCPS announces that it is completely committed to an equitable and inclusive work and educational environment. And I cannot stress to you, gang, enough the importance of those two words. Inclusive, you've probably already come into contact with, and you already know that inclusive has been corrupted into a code word for whatever ideas, agendas that the left actually wants and promotes. Equity, however, that's a new one. Although equity sounds like equality, it is nothing like equality at all. If equality was water, equity would be oil. James Lindsay, in fact, in his Social Justice Dictionary, which I highly recommend that you read so that you can get into the mindset of the woke, link is in the description, defines equity as social communism. The intentional redistribution of shares in order to adjust for and correct current and historical injustices, both as exist in reality and as have been drawn out by various critical theories. To be equitable, LCPS vows to combat white supremacy and systematic racism. As such, any employee of LCPS who engages in speech or any communication which can be reasonably interpreted to be racially insensitive, racist, or discriminatory will be disciplined. And this actually includes, gang, any communication, i.e. any social media post, any text messages that employees send out in their own homes on their own time. Which raises the question in my mind, how would LCPS know that any one of its employees had engaged in a problematic communication unless it was actually spying on its employees? Perhaps via overzealous woke students who are encouraged to spy on their teachers, like the old USSR encouraged children to spy on their parents. But this goes beyond simply keeping teachers and employees in line as ideological agents, gang. This goes down to the level of the children, because on its website, LCPS also says that it is the job of students and their families to combat white supremacy and systematic racism. LCPS also promises that grades and suspensions will be equitably distributed among students, meaning that what a student has actually earned himself or what he deserves himself will be thrown out the window, meaning in essence that justice will be staked like a vampire so that equity can reign supreme throughout the public schools in Loudon County. Even worse, it was reported that the district had spent $44,000 buying the children's version of Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Now, you might be asking, who the heck is Ibram Kendi? Well, in short, in a nutshell, he is a madman who, because we live in an insane world, has become the toast of high society through his work on racism. Kendi's actual genuine position is that the world can be neatly divided between racists and anti-racists. And if you are not firmly an anti-racist, then you are a racist. Doesn't matter if you claim that you are simply not a racist. Doesn't matter if you claim that you are colorblind. Doesn't matter if you claim to simply want whoever is best for the job. If you say any one of those things, any permutation of those things, you, in fact, are a racist. Furthermore, any disparities between racial groups, no matter what the reason, is proof positive of racism. And the only way, Kendi says, that we can defeat racism is actually through racism. And no, seriously, this is actually what Kendi says, quote, "The only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination." Because you see now, discrimination, qua discrimination, is not racist. If racial discrimination is defined as treating, considering, or making a distinction in favor of or against an individual based on that person's race, then racial discrimination is not inherently racist. The defining question is whether or not the discrimination is creating equity or not. If discrimination is creating equity, then it is anti-racist. In a nutshell, the Loudon County Public School system is going to be teaching its students how to be little racists. And it's not just Loudon County, gang. Schools across America, Chicago, Buffalo, New York, California, are teaching children as young as kindergarteners the 1619 Project. And we've talked about that project numerous times by now so that you know exactly what that means. And in what might be the most jaw-dropping and egregious example of them all, the school superintendent of Evanston, Illinois, a guy by the name of Devin Horton, publicly announced that Black, Hispanic, and LGBTQIA2+ students would be given first preference for in-person learning. White students, white straight students, would be taught via remote. All for the purposes of equity. The entire point of what I've said up to here, gang, is to make it clear that the colleges and the universities are not the problem. The problem is the entire American education system, from preschool through senior year of high school. The entire American educational system has become an ideological cesspool which has as its object and goal not the education of your children, but their transformation into mini-me's of the woke system. Yes, I know, there are good teachers out there still in the system. That is completely irrelevant because a few good teachers are not going to turn this ship around. In fact, as we've seen with the LSPS, the system is so determined to steal the souls of your children that it will bulldoze and crush any teacher who tries to oppose their transformation. Even any teacher who tries to just slow the process down, who raises their hand and says, hey, maybe preschoolers aren't exactly ready to learn about the 1619 Project yet. And sorry to say it, but the conservative movement has been way behind the ball on this one. Yes, school choice is a noble goal. Abolishing teachers' union? Great idea. Daring and radical even. 25 years ago. Today, way too tame. To defeat this monstrosity will require a completely different mindset. A radical one even. The complete and utter destruction of the American education system. Now, how is this going to be accomplished? Well, that's the real question, isn't it? And I'll be completely forthright with you, gang, like I always am. I'm not 100% sure right at this stage in time, right at this moment in time. I do know, however, that it will require more than simply arguing and fighting for school choice, which includes not just the option of sending your kids to private school, but also doing homeschooling and microschooling. I do know that it will require more than simply fighting for school choice. It will require actually enabling people to homeschool or to choose microschooling so that they can escape from the public education system. This will probably entail the right, the American conservative movement, starting a small interest loan business so that families who want to escape the public education system, who actually want their children to get a genuine education again, but who lack the cash to pull them out of the education system, will have the financial capital to actually make those dreams a reality. And this in and of itself will probably require the big boys of the conservative movement, people like the wunderkind himself, Ben Shapiro, to actually fund these programs, these small interest loan businesses. It will require, in other words, the right to become the Dale Carnegie and the Rockefellers of our time. It will also require genuine educational materials to be made to anyone who wants to escape the gulag of the American education system. Educational resources like the free courses that Hillsdale College puts up, the reading lists made up by the 20th century Aristotelian philosopher Mortimer Adler, recommended reading lists in history, art, philosophy, literature, mathematics, science, all with Cliff Note style notes so that it's not just jargon to people, but so that people can actually digest and understand what they're reading, what their children are reading and learning. But most important, gang, it will require a radically different mindset. The idea that the American education system needs to be treated the same way that the Romans treated Carthage. For too long, we've made school choice the goal, but making our goal more radical, more meaningful, will do two things. It'll set our faces for the long fight ahead, and it will put whatever victories we attain in clearer context. Too radical, too revolutionary, too impossible, you say? Well, maybe. But before we simply dismiss the complete abolition of the American education system as a worthy goal and go back to tweeting about how public teachers' unions need to be abolished, we should remember what Marcus Cicero, one of my heroes, the ancient Roman senator, said. What society does to its children will do to society. Food for thought there. But as always, what say you? What other tactics and strategies could be utilized for the eventual complete disassembly of the education system here in the United States? I'd love to know your thoughts, ideas, and opinions in the comment box below. Well, that about wraps up everything for right now, gang. Before you go, if you could give the video a like and share it with your friends on social media, I'd be very much obliged. And if you like the video, and if you like videos about culture, politics, and religion from a unique POV, then subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and never miss out on another video again. As always, thanks for watching, for giving me a little bit of your day. And thank you to everyone who has already subscribed to the channel. I appreciate you all. Until next time, gang, stay safe, stay free, by daring to read, think, speak, and write. I'll talk to you later. Ciao.